There are times when I'm writing a video and I can just already tell that the comment section is going to be a little bit of a mess, but let's get into this. What's up gamers, Dreamcastguy here, and it's finally time to address the major controversy around the Final Fantasy VII Remake, because at this point, there is a lot of people that are saying that the Final Fantasy VII Remake, Square Enix flat out lied about it. Now, in order to talk about this, we're going to need to go into spoilers. At this point, I'm assuming that you've played and hopefully beaten the FF7 Remake, mostly because in this video, we need to discuss the ending, the characters, and some of the stuff that they've decided to alter. Are you ready? Okay, here we go. So over the course of the last couple weeks, I've been spending a lot of times looking at the internet because I really love the Final Fantasy VII Remake. I've been actually doing multiple runs trying to get to every single trophy. And what's funny is, I keep stumbling upon stuff like this. Over on Reddit, there's entire threads talking about how Final Fantasy VII Remake is a scam and that they lied about it. There is these weird websites that are popping up. Here's one where it's an entire article about how Square Enix is lying about the Final Fantasy VII Remake because of all the altered content, all the big changes, even things like this. Here is a mega thread where people are actually discussing the nature of Final Fantasy VII, the big juicy bits, the reveals, how it all comes together, and this guy is actually saying that this game is a total piece of mess, that the fact that it's just a complete slopfest. Instead, he decided that the story needed to be changed in nearly every way as to make it almost incomprehensible. The remake adds so much unnecessary poop that was never part of the original game and muddies up the story with no reason other than Nomura being a hack and subverting your expectations. Now, a lot of people have been coming to me with this stuff, mostly because they're curious on my take. I love the Final Fantasy VII Remake, I am obsessed with the original version of Final Fantasy VII, but let's face it, this game, it definitely isn't really a remake. Now, let's just look at this. Here we have the definition of remake. This is what we all sort of understand. To make anew or in a different form. Most of us, when we decide to start imagining a remake, especially when it comes to video games or movies, typically we imagine things like the Crash Bandicoot Insane Trilogy. This was a remake that came out 2 years ago now, and it was very universally loved. And it seemed like a big part of it was because obviously the developers were incredibly passionate about sticking with the source material, to the point at which, if you actually go into the code of the Crash Bandicoot Insane Trilogy, you can see that they built the game on the original wireframes. It almost makes it a remaster. I mean, this is just such a faithful brick-for-brick reconstruction that it is still the original game. Whereas the Final Fantasy VII Remake is actually a sequel. This is something that's still being theorized, and honestly this is just my own opinion on it, but in the ending, it seems like they're very heavily implying by showing like weird alternate reality and stuff and giving us visions of the future that are no longer true. It seems like they're pretty heavily sort of pointing to the fact that this is a futuristic Sephiroth or some sort of extra-dimensional timeline. The Cloud we're playing as now in the remake is not the Cloud that we once knew. This is an all-new series of events that's happening in a parallel universe, which makes people say, okay, that's fine, but this isn't really a remake. There's a reason that people are upset, and it's because the Final Fantasy VII Remake, using the term remake, people thought that we were just going to be getting one-to-one, the original tale, but with extra stuff added in. So we'd be blowing up Reactor 1 and Reactor 5, and then after that, maybe we'd be doing a little side quest where we're finding the lost cats. What people didn't predict is all these extra added elements, and let's face it, details that are just irrevocably changed. Like, some characters that are supposed to die are still walking around, they're still making friends, and they're still having fun, which undeniably definitely changes the tone of the story itself. Now, to me, I think that they did this for a purpose. Square Enix is trying to do something different with this, and I think that this is a gigantic gamble. Now, this is coming from somebody who is just a mega fan of the Final Fantasy franchise. I've beaten the games, I collect them, I have multiple versions of every territory. I mean, I am a huge aficionado of this series in particular. And something I've noticed over the course of the decades of being into this saga is that Square Enix, they like to try and reinvent it. They've said in the past that this is the reason that every single Final Fantasy has its own combat system and its own style of magic, is because they want to try and keep things very, very fresh. They're constantly trying to remake it so that something can be the perfect Final Fantasy. And if I had to try and make my own theory on this, I believe that the reason they're deciding to try and change so much is because even now, they cannot resist the temptation of making the perfect Final Fantasy VII. I think that what they're trying to do is make it where, even though this is going to be hitting the main points again, the death of Aerith, the fight against Sephiroth, I think that they're trying to recombobulate this. They wanted to take the original ingredients but make a different recipe out of it. Now, I do believe that a lot of people already understand this. Gamers are smart people. They're able to try and catch on to the fact that this isn't just trying to be the exact same thing again, but instead is a reinvention of it. The problem I see a lot of people having is, why did they put the word remake on the box? This isn't a remake. I mean, flat out, it's not. That's not what this is at all. If you're remaking a movie, then typically it's the same movie but with different actors and better special effects. Whereas this, it's not a remake. I mean, arguably, on paper, this isn't actually a remake. In fact, some people are very, very upset by this. I screenshotted this tweet here. Here's a guy named Renegade Brigade. I just finished it today. I've never been so angry after beating a game. Ending was trash. As Final Fantasy VII is my favorite game of all time, they pooped all over it with that ending. Very upset. What really sucks is that I loved everything about it until halfway into the last chapter. I just wish they told us that it was rebuilding of Evangelion and not a remake. No, they said for 5 years that they were staying true to the story and adding things to flesh out the city and people. Making it a new timeline breaks that. So as a hardcore fan who was told this, I was lied to. Now, I'm giving this guy a funny voice, but I don't think that this person is fully wrong. I think that this sentiment is still in its own way kind of accurate. I believe, though, that there is a purpose to this. My biggest thought now is that the name remake is not saying we're remaking the original Final Fantasy VII. They're saying that as the developers, they're remaking the timeline. This is a remake of reality. And that's why I think that each of the games are going to have an R name. I think that the second game is probably going to be Retribution, or maybe Rebirth. And then the third game can be something like Reunion or Reunited. I think that there's a lot of times where the trilogy is going to be trying to redo things, but in a way that I think is trying to make it where new and old fans can both be approachable to this. So this weekend, I have a friend that's been staying on my couch recently during this whole quarantine madness, and she was watching me play Final Fantasy VII Remake. I'm trying to get all the stupid side quests done and all the challenges and stuff, and while she was watching it, she kept just seeing crazy scenes like Cloud cross-dressing and stuff, and she was saying, was this in the original game? Was this in the original game? And was this in the original game? And for every single time, yes, it was. Everything that I feel like this game does the best is from the original masterpiece. This is still just, in many ways, this contains the spirit of Final Fantasy while trying to throw itself into a different future. Do I consider it a lie, though? Let's just boil it down to the very, very core. Yes, I do think that Square Enix purposefully misled you. I think that they were trying to pretend that this was going to be just a straight up, cut and dry, this is it and nothing else kind of story, because that's how they had to sell copies. But I think they did it with the best of intentions. I truly believe that the idea behind this is to try and make everybody who's never played Final Fantasy VII give it a chance. And the people who already loved it, like I have, we're definitely going to go into it. But I think what they're trying to do with this is say, okay, you've experienced the best of the past of Final Fantasy, but now we're going to be walking into the future of Final Fantasy. At this point, I think we have to realize that the game is not going to be the same. Each of the sequels that we're getting are probably going to be radically different. And more than that, I do believe that pretty much everything you believe, it could be thrown out the window. Aerith may live. Sephiroth may win. Every single time you think of like Ultimate Weapon or the Ruby and Sapphire, a lot of this stuff, as powerful and cool as it is, may not be in the shape we want. Square Enix is not trying to make Final Fantasy VII again, they're trying to make Final Fantasy VII 2. once you get used to that, I feel like you become a lot more accepting of this new, slightly controversial project. But these have just been my thoughts. I wanted to talk about it because I just see the discussion online and I just kind of wanted to jump in. But what do you think? Are you happy or are you upset by the changes they've decided to make? And do you think that this is for the better, or should it have just been the original freaking game with a new coat of paint? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, share with your friends, and subscribe if you haven't already. But do me the biggest favor of all and keep dreaming. Oh my gosh. Well, I hope the comment section is not a humongous mess, but I guess we're going to find out. Thanks so much for watching that video. If you want to see something else, you can always click this link to see what I put up last, or, you know, subscribe and see what's coming up next. Also, I promise that whatever I do, it'll try not to suck.